Hey, this is Dr. Pete, and I just wanted to do this video. I was given an email from a student that was looking at a discussion post in government about protesting and rioting and rights of Americans to assemble. And this is really a great time to study these things because we just got done with an inauguration. We have some people would say protesting in DC and around the country. Other people would note that maybe it's rioting. And it's an excellent time to review these things. And so not let's take the politics out of this, okay? Let's say, for example, Trump was not elected and Hillary was being elected. Would you still believe that what's going on in DC is peaceful protesting or rioting? And the reason I say that is when you switch words, names, and parties out, the idea is consistency. And a lot of times I'll debate things. I like debating just because it kind of keeps me fresh. Sometimes I learn things and I really try to stay open to sources and ideas and perspectives. And it gives me a little bit of ability to hone in like what others are saying. But consistency is the answer. So, for example, with the whole thing with Hillary versus Trump, switch the names around. Does it stay consistent? And if people are up in DC right now, here's an example. A local school district, and I'll leave it out because, I'm not saying people see this. I'm not saying it's a lot of people, but it's a local school, high school, and they send students to inaugurations. I believe they've done this for Bush, Obama, and now Trump. So it's not partisan, it's not political. They just want kids to see the historic nature of the process. Well, what's interesting is the local paper is talking about, hey, the kids got to see the inauguration and peaceful protesting, and I'm like, I don't know if that's kind of an interpretation of the word protest or protesting, because the bus that they were on has a big hole in the windshield and it's spray painted. Well, to me, that's rioting. Okay, that's how I look at rioting. And then I start wondering, at what point, you might ask that question when answering, again, take the politics out. At what point is a protest different from rioting? And according to the D.C., Washington D.C., and that's a federal district, by the way, meaning federal laws over federal laws actually dictate it and control it. When you get popped for rioting, the difference between protesting and rioting is 10 years and $250,000 fine. So that might be a quick way to define, yeah, that's the difference between rioting and protesting. But and from a more practical standpoint, some really truly believe the ends justify the means, meaning violence is acceptable if the means, if the ends say it's okay. That is one philosophy. But remember, when you adhere to that, other people are now saying, well, you did that, so why can't I do that? And so you start getting into potential issues here. What's good for one is good for all. And you got to be very, very aware of that because it will be used against people later. The question then becomes is, at what point is violence acceptable? And that's a different issue. And I had some rioters, if you will, argue the case. Well, the founding fathers did this, and they went to war, and it's like, yeah, but here's the trick, okay? The founding fathers knew full well that they pledged their lives, fortune, and sacred honor, and that's just a catchphrase. But they understood they put it all on the line. If they lost, we would not be calling them the founding fathers or the immortals or all these different things. We would be saying they're traitors, and not only traitors but the worst of a worst of people and basically dirt. That would be what the history would say. But because they won, history goes to the victor. And so they're very successful. They made the greatest democracy the world's ever seen. Well, then all of a sudden we see them differently. We see things from a very positive standpoint. So if someone says, well, I'm protesting and it's turning violent and I'm going to be a rioter in DC or wherever, well, that's fine. If you believe that's worth potentially going to jail for many, many years and fines and discrediting your movement, then that's fine. But think about if you're successful, what does that mean? That means you've overthrown the U.S. government. And then you say, oh, no, 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 we just want to replace people. Well, no, you overthrow the U.S. government. So think about what's going to happen if you were successful. Then you start arguing, well, maybe they don't want to be successful. They just want to cause problems, riot, and get their moment on YouTube and fame and all that. That might be really what they're there for. So again, from a political standpoint and an analysis standpoint, this is a very good time to study the difference between protesting and rioting. And I think there's aspects of the DC March for the women's that was very peaceful and protesting, and I can see where this is a very positive thing, and that's something I'd want my daughter to see, aspects of it. And there's others that were very vulgar, ugly, and some were violent, and I don't think I'd want her to see that. Okay, because being 11 years old, obviously she's impressionable, and if she saw that, she may have a very bad feeling or perspective of the violence and the ugliness and the crudeness and the vulgarity of it, of parts of it. So I think the best thing to do, from my perspective, is always say, would I do this if it was my kid was there? Would I do this if people were watching me and my job depended on it? Or put different standards in. Some people say, what would Jesus do? I don't, that's a religious context of it. But in essence, what would you do if people were watching? And then you start asking the question that Plato, or the ring of invisibility, what would you do if you could get away with it? And that's really scary, because some of these people probably would go out of control. So when you study this, watch videos, see the difference, see the behaviors, see the effectiveness of violence versus nonviolence. Martin Luther King spoke to the idea of nonviolence. Gandhi spoke to these ideas. Gandhi took down an empire, the British Empire in India. Martin Luther King helped to integrate society with nonviolence. Uh, Violence very rarely works in a Western society to make it change it the way it does things. So we have to ask those questions: is protesting different from rioting? How do we determine that? And it's very clear, like they always say, if I saw it, I know it. But how do we define it? So that's something that I encourage students to really look at. If there's anything else, please drop me a line. Hopefully that covered it from a larger perspective, but I do appreciate the topic.